Today in Matt's class, we are going to talk about the secret of connecting edges. Doesn't seem like connecting edges, like what is this? Why would this even be a big deal? But I guarantee this is going to change your life. So previously we talked about line quality, and we talked about how the outside edges of your character or your subject, whatever it is you're drawing, how the outside edges are thicker, but also things that are overlapping are also thicker. So that's just kind of a basic overview, of what you're trying to do with good line quality, having variances between thick and thin lines. But there's one more thing that goes a little bit deeper than that, that is awesome. And if you can infuse this into your line quality, wow, is it going to make a really cool difference. So I remember when I was younger and when I was going to art school and when I was studying all throughout and even earlier in my career, I noticed that when you look at anything like comic books or when you look at figurative art, any kind of linear style art, you've got thicks and thins, and then you have areas where lines are thicker and then areas where lines are thinner. So yeah, it's true, the outsides are usually somewhat thicker and the insides, the details, are somewhat thinner. But I noticed that there was more than that. There was areas where I couldn't really make heads or tails. I would see professional art of artists that I love, and I would look at the line work. It was so exquisite, and it looked so voluptuous, and it looked so fantastic. But I couldn't really understand, why are some areas a little bit thicker and some are a little bit thinner? Are they just making it up and like, oh, I feel like going a little bit thicker here and oh, I feel like going a little bit thinner here just because? So I would try that, and I would try to do thick and thin lines and just give it some variance, and it always looked bad. It never worked, and it never had that same voluptuousness to when you just look at stuff and it just, man, it pops and it looks so perfect. It looks so great. So I'll never forget the day my life changed. There was a time I was set up at a comic book convention. One of my favorite artists, a gentleman named David Finch, and back then he was illustrating a lot of books for Top Cow. Now he does a lot of stuff for Marvel and DC, and he's just a fantastic artist. He was set up at this show, and I kind of wanted to go and say hi to him just because I'm a big fan, but he always had a line of people at his table and I didn't want to bother him. So I just figured, I'll probably never get to talk to this gent. So I think it was a Sunday before the show opened up. I was kind of setting up, and I kind of noticed in my peripheral vision that someone came up to my table and was looking through my stuff. So I was like, I'll be with you in just a second. I was like getting a box out or something. So I turned around, I'm like, yeah, can I help you? And I look, there's David Finch, and he's going through my art. And he's like, hey, Matt, I just wanted to introduce myself. And I was like, I know who you are. You're David Finch. Oh my gosh, you're like only one of the greatest comic book artists of all time, in my opinion. And he was just like, wow, that's crazy. Listen, I'm so blown away by your painting. Would you ever consider, because for fun, David Finch likes to paint, even though comic books and drawing and inking is what he's known for. Apparently, as a hobby, he just loves painting, and he wants to know if I will come to his studio in Canada for a day and show him how to paint. And I'm like, are you kidding? I would absolutely do that. Like, wow, because I'm like such a fan of this guy. I was like, that's amazing. So I drove to his house in Canada. And when I went there, I brought all my paints and brushes. I brought my airbrush and like all kinds of stuff that I was going to show him. As soon as I walked through the front door, he's got this front room that is filled with paintings, and he's already awesome. I walk in and like, oh my gosh, like, dude, you're already so good. Like, what can I got nothing. I got nothing to offer you. Like, man, I thought I was going to show you all this cool stuff, and like, you're already really good. So what kind of happened is I started asking him questions, because the way he could draw and the way he could ink, it had this line quality that I just was never able to master. So I told him what I wanted, what I was trying to learn. He was like, what are you talking about? And I explained it in detail. Why is it sometimes thicker and thinner? And then he pulled out some of his inked drawings and he said, point to what you're looking at. And I said, here, 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 here. Why does this look so amazing, but when I do it, it looks like crap? And he said, oh, you're talking about connecting edges. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, connecting edges. And I'm like, it's a thing? And I was upset that I don't know this thing, but I was also happy, like, oh good, it's not just this random thing. There actually is this really cool thing that you can do. And so David Finch, in person, at his home studio in Canada, showed me what connecting edges were. And now I am going to, I hope it's okay with David, but now I'm going to reveal the secret to you. By the way, you should totally follow David Finch's YouTube channel. He's got awesome tutorials that he's been putting on there lately. I'm going to leave a link down below where you can go follow and subscribe to David. Okay, so here is how it works. In its most simplest form, whenever you have a line, that line is thin. It doesn't have to have a thickness to it. Let's say we draw another line. That line also, it's not touching anything yet, so that line can stay thin. But let's say we've got a line like this. This line is connecting to this one, so this line needs to be thicker. It needs to be thicker, and then it can taper to thin again. Now, we know that it's this line that's touching. It's not this line that you want to make thicker where it's touching, because if you look at the end of this line, it's not touching anything. If you look at the end of this line, it's not touching anything. This isn't touching anything, so that stays thinner, but this line touches here, so that's where the connecting edge is. It's actually this line that needs to be thicker where it's touching that. Seems easy, right? It's easy when you look at it, but then when you do it yourself, it'll be a little more complicated. Let's say we've got another line here. Again, this line is touching this one, so it's actually this line. As it gets closer to here, this is where it needs to get thicker. Now this seems kind of counterintuitive, but this actually is really cool because now this almost looks, doesn't this almost look like a noodle bridge that you're looking at the top, and this is almost like a stream passing under it? It's a little bit weird to think about because I just got done telling you guys about how the outer edges of things should be thicker lines, and that's true most of the time. This is kind of counterintuitive because now this noodle that's on top has thin lines, and then the line that's passing underneath it is thicker. So it almost seems like, isn't that the opposite of what we talked about last time? It is. But in general, you still want to have darker and thicker lines on the outside and then thinner lines on the inside. But within that, you still can do what's called connecting edges. Now, you can get way more advanced with this. Connecting edges actually exist in real life. If you look at the way, if I kind of make a fist like this, you see those little nooks and crannies right there? Those are connecting edges. Look at that. Where those lines are right there, all those little areas, those are connecting edges. So real quick, I want to kind of do a drawing, and I'm going to show you what happens when you don't do connecting edges, and then I'm going to show you what happens when you do connecting edges, and I can't believe I just said do. So here is my basic stick figure. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start adding in the contour, but when I do it, I'm going to add in connecting edges. So let's say we've got this guy's jaw right here. Right now it's not connecting to anything, so we're just going to leave it as it is. Here's his neck right here. And let's say we've got shoulder, deltoid, tricep. Okay, now already there's a couple areas here that are touching. So this line here, the back of the neck where it's touching here, that needs to be thicker. This line here where it's touching the deltoid coming out, that needs to be thicker. The tricep comes behind the deltoid, so that is going to be just a little bit thicker. We'll have the forearm like this. The bicep comes out in front there. Now see how the bicep is touching that? It's not this line that goes thicker. This line right now, it's not touching anything. Look at the end of it. Not touching anything, not touching anything, or at least not yet. But this line is touching. That's the one that has the connecting edge. that's the one that's got to go thicker. Connecting edge. And maybe the lats here. Connecting edge. This right here. Connecting edge. Where this passes behind there. Connecting edge. This little part, this little bit of the hand here is going in front of the forearm. That's a connecting edge right there. Already, can you see how adding in these connecting edges, how it's really making the form stand out a little bit more voluptuous as it's rolling kind of around the figure? Connecting edges are awesome. It just adds, first of all, like in like a design aesthetic, it's just adding variance to the line. So already like that looks great. You've got these cool little dark areas that are points of interest. So even in just a design aesthetic, it's working, but three-dimensionally, it's just so much better. And when I learned this, it just changed my life. I was like, oh my gosh, because I had been doing so much inking for years and illustrating comic books, and I was just kind of, wherever I felt like it, like, yeah, I'm gonna make a thick line here just because I'm artsy and I feel like it. But there was never a rhyme or reason. And I knew I would ask art teachers, they either would say, I have no idea what you're talking about, or they would make stuff up and they'd say, it's the pressure points. Yeah, wherever there's a pressure point, you make a darker line. So I was never getting a straight answer. And then when I finally learned, I was like, yes, I knew there was a way. I knew there was a rhyme or a reason. Oh, it's amazing. It feels so good. Okay, so I'm going to draw just a little bit more here. So let's say we've got pectoral. The rib is coming out in front of it like that. Now this is passing behind this rib cage, so we're going to make this just a little bit thicker. Here is the deltoid coming around like so. That is passing behind the jaw. So that's going to be a little bit thicker. Maybe we've got a little bit of the neck like this. Again, that's a connecting edge like so. Here is the bicep in front. So that is going to be a connecting edge right there. Maybe there's a little definition in the bicep. All right, so what I want to do now, just to kind of illustrate my point, no pun intended, I want to draw the same thing again. So I'm going to draw all of this line work, but instead of doing connecting edges, I'm going to draw all my lines the same, and I'm going to show you why you definitely want to use connecting edges. So let's say we've got our deltoid here. So can you see here, I drew the same figure here. This has no variance, so it's just like spaghetti lines. Do you see how flat this looks? And I mean, I've got the overlapping in the right place, so it has a little bit of three-dimensionality to it just because it actually has lines passing in front of other lines. But just look how you can just feel around this character. It really feels three-dimensional. Connecting edges are awesome, and if you can infuse it into your figure drawing, your comic book drawing, your manga drawing, your advertising art, sometimes even with illustration, if you're incorporating some kind of line quality, there's a lot of artists that use connecting edges, and it'll change your life. That's all I got for this, and check out David Finch's page and tell him I sent you. But really cool stuff. The secret of connecting edges.